Expedition 33 can get a little overwhelming, especially in the early game. They do a good job at teaching you the basics, but some of them get lost in the heat of battle, especially as you unlock new mechanics to utilize. So that's why I'm here to guide you through all the important things that you need to know, and by the end of this video you will have a very clear understanding of how Expedition 33 works and begin your playthrough fully equipped to take down the Paintress. Let's kick things off with the biggest chunk of gameplay, which is combat. Early on you'll learn that you can start combat by running up to an enemy and tapping R1 or RB depending on if you are on PlayStation or Xbox. I do not know the PC input, and this will allow you to play first on turn start every time. However, there are some enemies in the open world, mainly bosses, where this won't always work. So don't get startled when this happens, because it is still a good habit to have. Each player and enemy has turns playing. The timeline on the left hand side shows the order in which turns will be taken. The order of your team is determined by their speed stat, the order in which teammates were added to your party, and by the use of certain Pictos or Lumina. Each turn is divided up into actions you can take to deal or mitigate damage. Base attacks generate 1 AP and are generally 1 hit. This will be your main form of generating AP early on, until you get access to much better Lumina or Pictos. Skills, on the other hand, consume AP and are the main source of damage. Some skills will allow you to generate additional AP for either you or your teammates. During the skills animation, there will be a quick time event that allows you to increase the damage of your attack. When the quick time event is failed, some skills will either inflict damage on you or fail the attack entirely. Luckily, these quick time events consist only of pressing X or A when the timer reaches the yellow border. You also have access to items known as tints, which offer various benefits like healing any selected party member, granting AP, and reviving fallen teammates. These take up turns though, so use them wisely. On enemy turn you can react by dodging, parrying, or jumping. And without the use of certain Pictos or Lumina, dodging doesn't generate AP, but it has a much more forgiving window than parrying. So it is extremely useful when learning a new enemy's attack pattern. Parrying generates AP per successful parry, and on perfect parries a counter attack will occur which deals very high damage. Counter attacks will be your main damage dealer for at least the first 50% of the game. However, the timing to hit a perfect parry is very tight, and sometimes it takes consecutive parries without fail to initiate a counter attack. Avoiding or deflecting an enemy's attack is usually done by observing visual or audio cues. Most of the time this happens when the enemy's weapon starts moving towards you or about to connect with you. I am working on a video where this will be explained in much more detail. For now though, just focus on learning the timing of enemy attacks and utilizing those dodges. You can only jump an enemy's attack when this icon appears on screen. This will then prompt you to initiate a counter attack by pressing R2 or RT. There are other skills and counters you'll get access to, but they only come into play a little later and borders on spoiler territory, so I won't touch on them here. Last on the combat spectrum, but certainly not least, you have the ability to free aim. This is useful for hitting weak points, sometimes dealing impressive amounts of damage, and is especially useful against those pesky flying enemies which have a tendency to dodge your attacks. Keep in mind that some weak points on enemies take multiple hits to be destroyed. Free aiming also works great against shields and doesn't use up a turn, so it allows for some strategic gameplay. The downside, however, is it costs 1 AP per shot. During the heat of combat there are various buffs, debuffs and status effects to utilize that can significantly benefit your team and that you'll need to be aware of, since they can severely cripple your characters as well. These advantages or disadvantages are shown here. I won't be going through all of them because a lot of them are self-explanatory, but there are some that are important to be aware of early on. Firstly and most commonly is the burn status effect. This effect can be stacked multiple times, which deals damage at the start of each turn, and the damage is dependent on the amount of stacks you apply or receive. Each stack lasts for 3 turns from the moment that it is applied. This effect is most commonly applied with the use of skills, but certain Pictos or Lumina can help to apply burn on each free aim shot. Secondly, we've got Mark. Mark is applied by the use of skills or Pictos/Lumina. The affected character takes an increase of 50% damage for 1 instance of damage, meaning 1 hit, and this is useful when setting up enemies to receive high amounts of damage, but it also applies to you, so be careful. Exhausted is a status effect that becomes a real pain later on in the game. This removes the ability to gain AP from any source, and it is only applied to you or your party members. Luckily, we can remove it with the use of certain skills that specifically state that they remove status effects, or you can equip a Picto that allows healing tint to remove status effects as well. Earlier you heard me mentioning shields. Shields are mainly used by enemies, but it can also be applied to you or your teammates. They are removed as the target takes a hit, but some of your characters can work around this by either completely removing all the shields, this is done with Mael, or deal damage straight through them, this is done with Minoko. Next up we've got Broken. Broken is a status effect that when applied takes you or the enemy out of combat for one turn, and the damage you receive is increased by 20%. This is applied by attacking an enemy, which fills up the golden bar beneath an enemy's health bar, either using basic attacks or skills, but they build up the bar pretty slowly, especially with skills that use multiple hits. Using skills that explicitly state that it can break or does break damage builds up this meter much quicker. Buffs, debuffs and status effects are some of the best and most useful ways to turn the tide of battle in your favor, especially when you are up against very tough enemies. Trust me, have a character on deck or multiple characters on deck that can dish these out, because the most common and easiest way to apply these are through the use of skills. It is very useful for the mimes, for example, which put up a shield and mitigate your damage almost entirely. They can only receive damage once they have been broken. The burn, a lot of enemies in this game is weak to burn and weak to fire, so hitting a burn will absolutely decimate them, especially if you start stacking them up very high. I've gotten it past 20 and the damage is very substantial. So I've been mentioning Pictos and Luminas quite a bit throughout this video, and I didn't really explain it, so I'm about to take you through the most efficient way to use the Pictos and Luminas and what you should consider when taking into account which Pictos and Luminas you want to use. Pictos are pieces of gear that mainly increase your character's stats. You can only equip one Picto on one character at a time. They also have a passive effect known as Lumina, which grant certain advantages. However, the only reason to really use a Picto for its Lumina effect is usually determined by its Lumina cost. Luminas are passive effects that can dramatically change the way you play and are essential to build an optimal team. Seen here on the right hand side of the screen, you can equip Lumina when 1. You have enough Lumina points, and 2. You've mastered a Pictos by winning 4 battles with the Picto equipped. Luminas have different costs to them though, and some of them can get really high Lumina cost, which makes it more beneficial to equip it as a Picto, as I mentioned earlier. Note that you cannot equip a Lumina to a certain character if that certain character has the Picto equipped already, so you cannot double stack the Lumina and the Picto. And unlike Pictos, you can equip Lumina across multiple characters, so you can take the same one and put it across all 4 of your characters or all 5 of your characters. Just a quick tip though, the moment you pick up a new Picto, equip it immediately and master it. Even if you don't necessarily care what the passive effect is, you will most probably sleep on certain effects and you'll be hitting yourself later down the line. So equip it, master it, and then that way you won't have to go and farm a bunch of mobs just to master your Pictos. And you can identify mastered Pictos by its golden border. So now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's quickly run through everything that you can do while in the open world, and there is one very important thing you'll want to make use of as often as possible, which is camping. Camping can be initiated by hitting down on the directional pad, and here you can upgrade your weapons, your resources, you can catch up with teammates, which becomes very important later down the line, and very importantly, you can write in Gustav's journal. When it comes to upgrading your weapons, you will need a resource known as chroma catalysts. These can be found throughout your playthrough, and they are almost exclusively marked as purple loot, but sometimes they will be rewarded after defeating an enemy or a boss, and some gestural merchants can sell them as well. Also note that there are different chroma catalysts needed for your weapon depending on the level range. When upgrading resources, you can increase the strength of the tints that your expedition carries with the use of Shape of Health, Shape of Energy, and Shape of Life. The amount you carry will be increased as you collect the respective shards, also indicated by purple loot or from boss fights. And most importantly, you can increase the amount of Lumina points each character has by spending Color of Lumina. Color of Lumina is acquired throughout the world in the form of purple loot as well, and you can buy them from merchants as well. I highly recommend that you do this because it stacks up very quickly, and this is essential in the late game as it allows you to equip some of the most overpowered passive abilities the game has to offer. Seriously, some of these things are crazy broken. Have a look at them. Do not sleep on the Color of Lumina. And as I mentioned earlier, catching up with teammates only comes into play later down the line, but it is important because it allows you to unlock new abilities and new counters, which I don't want to touch on because it veers into spoiler territory. So we'll steer clear of that. By the time you reach that, you'll be very well acquainted with the basics if you have been following along with this video. Or not. Now let's touch on a little bit of exploration. While exploring the open world, it's important to make sure that you take the time to explore as much as you can, as you'll discover a bunch of new and optional areas which will reward you with all the different goodies I mentioned earlier in the video. And as you make your way through the zones, you can easily find yourself low on health after fighting a bunch of mobs or defeating a boss. Luckily, you can heal your entire party by pressing down and holding the triangle or Y button depending on your controller, which uses up one of your chroma elixirs. Chroma elixirs can be increased in total as you explore and find more of them. They're typically inside these chroma chests, which contain a variety of different loots like wardrobe options or weapons for your characters. Also note that you will eventually come across these expedition flags where you will be able to rest, which replenishes your resources, upgrade your character's attributes and skills, and also fast travel. Keep in mind that you can only fast travel within individual levels from flag to flag. You cannot fast travel from the open world into a different zone. Now we finally get to the juicy parts of the game you'll want to be familiar with. Skills are abilities that you can unlock with each character that gives them unique ways of being played, making for some of the most interesting build diversity and incredible synergy opportunities. Each character has 6 skill slots and each character has a very distinct way of playing. Lune, for example, uses stains. She can either generate a stain that corresponds with the element of the ability she's casting, or she can consume stains that enhance whatever ability she has the required stains for. She is also the only character where her weapon's element doesn't affect her skills in any way. Then on the opposite spectrum you have Mahel, which utilizes stances, with each stance giving her a buff and they generally feed into one another, virtuous stance being the strongest. Many of the characters though can utilize another important aspect in order to enhance their abilities, and that is critical hits. Critical hits increase the damage the target takes by 50% and is one of the best ways to reach the highest possible damage levels. Using skills with multiple hits will often trigger more crits, since every hit has a chance to deal critical damage. There is no one character that is the same or even similar to one another, so have fun mixing and matching to find the team synergy that works the best for you. Keep in mind though that leveraging an enemy's weakness, usually elemental, will give you the upper hand, especially in the early game. Lune is typically the best for figuring out what most of the enemies are weak to, since she has access to almost all the different elements. Next up we've got attributes. Now honestly these are pretty straightforward, but if you're new to turn-based games like I am, you'll probably be a little confused as to what the agility stat does. This simply increases the amount of times your character can play in a single turn and determines the order in which your team takes their turns. This is only very useful on some characters like Lune or Mahel, to use their abilities in order to gain the upper hand as early as possible. Don't get me wrong, it's a very good stat, especially against enemies with high speed stats of their own. If your speed stat is also high, the enemy won't be able to go more than once in a row as often as you would find in the late game. The other two stats that are basically a must on every character is Vitality and Luck. Vitality goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. More health equals more room for error, and luck increases your crit chance, which is obviously invaluable. Besides boosting your character in 5 different ways, attributes also play a role in increasing your weapon's damage, since all weapons scale off of different attributes. Each weapon also has an element associated with it, which will in turn change the element of certain skills that state that they use the weapon's element. As I mentioned earlier, the only exception for this rule is Lunae. Weapons are acquired via finding loot while exploring, usually marked by a distinct red color, beating certain bosses, and can be bought from gestural merchants. Keep in mind that some weapons can be upgraded for free by defeating mobs of enemies in the open world or by defeating bosses. So we've covered the major aspects of the game. Let's finish up by going over a few minor tips that can possibly help you out a ton. Almost all of the information we covered in this video can be reviewed by going over to the Expedition Basics section in the pause menu, so don't hesitate to check up on something that you might have forgotten about, or if you come across a mechanic that gives you trouble. The game also has save files stored internally, but you cannot make manual saves as you can in other games. If you wish to revisit a previous save file, go to the settings menu where you can find the load save file, and you'll be able to find the autosave files within your current playthrough. And while you're in the settings, you can go to the accessibility section and turn off the QuickTime events if you find them bothersome. And lastly, if you lower the difficulty, you'll find that the dodge and parry windows are a bit more forgiving. Don't feel bad for doing this, since we all enjoy games differently. I personally played on the Expeditioner difficulty because I enjoy a bit of a challenge, but not everyone has to feel the same. You bought the game with your own money, so play it however you want. But that is it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and if I've missed something, please share it with us in the comment section. Let me know if you enjoyed the video and if you'd like to see more like this by hitting the like button and subscribing, maybe. I'll be posting a more advanced tips and tricks video at the end of the week, so keep an eye out for that. Until then, stay safe and may God bless you all.